am Kyle Cherrick, and I am here at the Madison College Cooking Demo Series presented by Vollrath. And to my right is the esteemed chef and baker, Pierre Zimmermann.
Hello.
Thank you for being here, chef.
It's my pleasure.
Two-time world baking champion, both as a coach and as a competitor, and then getting one of the highest honors that you can from the Ministry of Culture from France. Yeah, I would say you have some good credentials. But you're baking here in America in Chicago. La Fournette is one of, a bakery that I've made pilgrimages to, and I know many do. And then you provide for so many within the community, restaurants and so forth. But tell us about your beginnings, because I know that you grew up in very much you call yourself a village baker, multi-generational baker, in a small village in Alsace.
Yes, I'm coming from a small village next to Strasbourg. I'm the fourth generation of baker, and I grew up in the middle of flour, bread, and cookies. But yeah, this is a very tiny village. It's like in this village there were 400 people. It's a type of village, if you don't break when you come in, you miss it, you know, you're on the other side.
I know those small towns very well. Wisconsin has many of those.
But what is great, we were very close to Strasbourg, and as we sold the bakery, we used to have 15 bakers. Of course, not just for these 400 customers,
people, yeah.
but we made cakes and products for a more larger community. But it was great to live in the middle of farms and in the middle of a small village, because I think this made a part of my vision of healthy and good food. You know, I think growing up in the middle of fields, and you understand the pressure to make good wheat. You know, to have good wheat. Good wheat gives good flour makes good bread, and the whole chain is important. So my friends are farmers, and I think this was my best chance.
I have a strong affinity for that story, having grown up in and around and on farms here in Wisconsin, and that connection to the food. It was common sense to me, and then traveling the rest of the country later in life, realizing that not everybody saw what was 3 meals a day that way, as just so perfunctory of, well, of course I know where it comes from, or the person that knows the person that it comes from.
Yeah. This is, I think it's the key, and only later you discover how lucky you are when you're exposed to something like that in your young age.
That's well put, yeah. So when you came to the States, and now you are also an instructor at the French Pastry School, begun, I think, maybe 15, 18 years ago by Jackie and Sebastian. How do you balance teaching students and then expound on the massive production you do, but still at this incredibly high level? I will say it, you're very humble. You're one of the best bakers in the United States and in the world. So you'll have to live with that.
You know, I love always to say, as I was in Alsace, the baker in my small village, I would say that I was the best baker of my village because I was the only baker in my village. You know, I don't pretend to be an extremely good baker, but I do what I love, and I try to do it the right way every single morning. Living in Chicago and being exposed to the craziness of a big city like that, another culture, another language, I'm dealing with Fahrenheit degrees. I'm still lost after that many years with these conversions. But this doesn't change my way of my vision of doing good. You know, doing good is doing good bread every single morning, and also to share what I love with other people. One of my grandfather was a baker, the second grandfather was a teacher, and I think I'm probably a mix between those two guys. And I grew up in a company, in our family bakery. There was no secret. So it's not something that we hide because we mean that we have the good recipe. When we have a good recipe, we share it because it's the only way to expand that quality, you know. And for me, it's very important to prepare the next generation to do good breads, you know. Otherwise, someday when you and I will be retired, where would we find good bread if we don't teach the young kids today, you know?
And this is a priority.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. When I go in somewhere in vacation, I spend always the 2 first days of my vacation time to identify the right baker for the rest of my week, you know. It is a hard job, you know, but this is the beauty of our craft, you know.
Yeah.
Worldwide, you'll find wonderful bakers, you know, and sharing the same problems. And today I'm in Chicago. I'm as much Chicagoan today. I feel as much Chicagoan as I'm French, just because it's a community that opened her hands to our project. We are successful because people trust in what we do, and they appreciate what we do, and c'est la vie.
Well, there was quite a nice opening when you agreed to come to the United States. The New York Times did an article on that. Not everyone gets that welcome mat laid out for them as far as talent, but so what kind of equipment, how did you embrace the change from what you were doing in Alsace to then coming to a city where the demand was immense for your breads? Yeah,
but we are still very artisans. If you come and visit our bakery, you'll see mixers, ovens, proofers. They look the same. They are a little bit bigger than what we used to have, but it's still the exact same equipment. Our breads are hand-shaped, of course. Shaping 5,000 breads a day means a lot of bakers, but these are bakers. It's not a line of production. There is our products. We have no preservatives. We have no dough conditions. Everything is done like my grandfather learned me how to make bread, you know. And we do it on a higher scale, but we do it with our hands and with our love every morning. Yeah, I would like to see that. I know many of your protégés, so one or two very close, and they've described it, and I just haven't gotten up that early yet. And this is amazing. Oftentimes we'll go to dinner after these interviews, but you are going right back to Chicago so you can get up and bake tomorrow. Yes, exactly. You know, the key is to be ready on time in the morning, and making bread is a countdown. You know at what time your customer expects the bread, and you have to say, okay, it takes that much time to bake. The second fermentation, I have to shape it. I have the first fermentation, and then you discover how early you have to wake up to start your production. You know. And my understanding is one mistake in the early stages is exponentially. Profound as then you continue the process. There are some key positions in the process. When you're alone in a small bakery, you can only blame yourself. But if you have different bakers and at different positions, you have to have the right guys at 3 moments. The first is the mixing. You're right. If you mess up the scale, the ingredients, or if you overmix the dough, you can do whatever you want. The final product just shot. And then you have, of course, shaping. You know, the beauty of a bread has to be shaped the right way, and it requires sensibility. You know, it's not a pure science like doing pastry where you scale by the gram and you mix and you have almost every time the same result. Well, it's a living thing at that point. It's a living thing, exactly. And then you have the baking, because you can destroy all that hard work in 1 minute, you know. You miss it, you know, or you score it too deep or not deep enough. You load it too early or too late, and you destroy everything. So these are the 3 key positions where you have to have the right guys. So you started your apprenticeship when you were 15. How many of those moments did you have along the way? Oh, you know, what is great when you start as young as that, you have all your life to do all the mistakes, you know. So you burn bread, you overmix bread, but it takes time, you know, to master perfectly every single step of bread making takes really time. It's not just time, you know, say, okay, it takes me 5 years. It's not right to say that. It's more about what is the energy that you're ready to spend into that moment? You know, what attention are you ready to give to that? If you have 1,000 other problems and you cannot be focused on what you do, you cannot succeed. You have to spend a strong and really a hard energy at that moment to make sure you control what you do. But this is the beauty of doing bread, you know. This is what makes me happy every morning. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, with humidity and changing of ingredient, I mean, it's never the same.
Every single morning is different, you know. Here you have variation in weather. You know, my grandfather used to tell me, you know, in America, everything is bigger, different, even the weather is different, you know. You have here variation, it's like crazy. One day you have 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the next day you are at 10, you know. And the yeast that you have, or the sourdough that you have in your bread is the same. So you have to find solution to, some days you have to wake him up because it's too cold. Some other days you have to find a way to slow it down.
Let him nap a little longer,
So yeah, it's a daily challenge, but this is also, I think, to be consistent as a baker is a real challenge. It's very hard. I think in the food industry is one of the hardest position. But this is also what makes it great, you know. I love it. We don't use any help, you know, chemicals, nothing that helps us to control that. If our bread looks good, we did the job. If the bread doesn't look good, it's our fault too, you know. We have no excuse.
Talk to the transition from production to artisanal, as the American palate has really evolved, foodies and things like that. People are demanding the better macaron, the better baguette, you know, this, that. But you also came here to make a living on scale and teach people how to do this replicatable to a certain extent. So both with hands and heart, and then with equipment, how do you teach that transition?
So I think, you know, we use ancestral, we use very old recipes, but this doesn't mean that we have to continue to bake bread like my grandfather did. You know, he used to mix by hand. This is over. We cannot, this is not a standard. You cannot succeed today that way. You have to use the tools that you have. And if I say that I don't use improvers or whatever, I need equipment that gives me consistency, you know. Coolers at the right temperature, you know, all the quality of the equipment is the key.
Mixers that do what human arms can do.
And you control the exact mixing time. All these details make that you are able to do a more consistent job every day. And we use the technology for that, and we use the equipment for that. But the equipment will never replace our decision. You know, it's not a chain that is full automatic. You decide when you stop, or you decide when it's time to bake. But you need good ovens, you need good tables, you need good equipment, otherwise you're dead.
So you live in two worlds. One, you're in one of the most progressive food cities in America, perhaps the most progressive, Chicago. And then you come from 4 generations of bakers in a very classic is almost an understatement, right? Style, way of doing things. How do you bridge those two? How do you work that dance in what you do?
Yeah, so I since ever I was very curious, and I think to succeed as a chef, you have to open your eyes, you have to taste, you have to be curious of what's happening somewhere else. I was lucky, like you said, to be the coach of a team. And 3 years ago, I was the president of the jury for an international competition. So I traveled around the world. I met bakers from 35 different countries. So you're exposed to a ton of ideas, of textures, of flavors.
The French baguette in Vietnam is different than the French baguette.
The French, they try to do it very French. But then in some competitions like that, they play on international bread, because we can consider baguette as is French, but it's definitely an international bread. And then they have to present traditional breads. And so I discovered wonderful products, you know, of course, some of them that we could never adapt to our market. But being open like that, being curious and discovering all of that, this helps you. You come home and you have tons of new ideas. And you see these guys working in a different way or in a different shape. You see equipment that you never saw before. And you said, of course, I'm killing myself doing that, you know. And these guys, they have a plastic thing and they do it like that. And I think this is the key.
Some heating elements, something. Yeah. This is great. It's true. Travel changes everything. Yeah, we don't travel to go somewhere. We travel to be changed inside.
Yeah, and when I travel, I don't go necessarily to in a fast food, you know, to feel comfortable with my food. I take the risk, you know.
Yeah.
So I was sometimes very sick because I took big risks, you know. But it's also a way to discover the authentic part of their life, you know. Otherwise, you miss it. You don't go in a resort and you stay in a resort. You have to meet these guys. I'm not a big fan of places where you go and you stay in an ambience that is ultra protected, you know. I prefer having someone that lives there and gives me a tour. And this is great.
Eat from the street or the small cart or this is my favorite place, but families are there and there's a television out in the corner and this sort of thing. So Chicago is a dynamic food town. You have everyone from Grad Achatz on down. But bread is a very pedestrian and proletariat thing in the sense that everyone knows good bread. But yet there seems to be so little of it.
Yes, a city like Chicago in France, in a city the same size would be Lyon, 3 million people roughly. In Lyon there are 900 artisan bakers, 900.
900.
And in Chicago we are 15, maybe, I don't know. But the food culture is different.
A baker's dozen.
The food culture is different, you know. In France, you go with your pyjama in the morning to the bakery next door. You buy croissant, baguette, you come home, and you take your breakfast. It's not what's happening in Chicago. So the market is completely different. What is great, and I think we moved at the right moment, because I used to come to the French pastry school starting in the late 90s, and at that point, I like to say it was a desert. There was no good bread in Chicago. And then some bakers started to work on it. And now more and more people are expecting good bread. And not only just good bread, but also healthy bread, you know, because more and more people discover that their whole life they ate chemicals that were hidden in the food. And now they have allergies and whatever.
Right.
We have to, I think, and I'm a part of the Bread Bakers Guild of America, and I truly believe that this new trend of artisan bakers will save the US, you know, not me, these guys, you know, and I met wonderful bakers. You talked about Gene. We have today examples. These guys are the next generation of wonderful bakers in the US. I'm just here to say, hey, this is what I used to do in France. I continue to do that here. If you love it, I can share the recipe. If you don't like it, no problem. But I don't pretend to be on a mission, you know, from God. No, these were the Blues Brothers. This wasn't me. You know?
Well, if you have 15 artisanal bakers in Chicago, I would say we have 3 in Milwaukee. So I guess we're not doing so well because we're about 1/3 the size. But it's still 3 too few. You know, I wish we had. I'm very fortunate that, like I said, about 12 blocks away is Gene's Bakery. So,
I think this new standard of small artisan bakers will, because these guys can only survive if they make enough money. And there was 10 years ago, honestly, I think there was no business plan that could tell them that 10 years later they will still be here.
In business,
and right now this is changing because they have the possibility, they have a new market is coming up. You produce first for the small community around you, and then the community next door wants your bread. You told me how Gene expands. Same thing, you know. If you do the right job and you're ready to multiply the way without changing your pure way to do the bread, you can only succeed.